It's good to be here, and it's good to talk about this product. We're really excited about this. I've been working on this project for a little bit over 2 years, but Dan, and he'll kind of tell you his story, but he's been dreaming about this for over 20. So actually, no, way over 20, close to 30, right, Dan? So he's been dreaming about this for a long time, since the 80s, and we're finding the other market. And I want to just reiterate what Mark said, is that in a niche market, he talked about the better mousetrap, but I just want to reiterate that niche markets are a great place for entrepreneurial activity, and you can make a lot of money in a niche market. Find that niche, find something that changes something, even if it's just slightly, but makes it better. Does something that changes, that can, you hear about disruptive technology. And so we're here to talk about a disruptive technology in the construction industry, and that's our ThermaGreen blocks. And what they are is, we have a couple examples that we brought, and I'll pass the small one around so you can kind of see what these are. This is a rigid foam block that we mold in a plant that we built here in Pleasant Grove, Utah. Okay, so this came out of the plant in Pleasant Grove, and it's a stay-in-place insulating concrete form. And so you'll stack these things like Legos, and they become the outer walls of your commercial building, they become the outer walls of your home, and so forth, and they're extremely energy efficient. You build with these blocks, you will save 75 to 80% on your utilities month in and month out. It's that efficient. And so there's a big crave and a rage of solar panels and so forth and green energy. Our niche is that, well, let's just build more efficiently first, and then when we use this renewable energy on top of that, then we're talking. Because there's so much, more than half of the energy emissions and losses in the United States actually come from in our construction, in the buildings, okay? And so we came up with a very energy efficient product. And this is a polyurethane block. I'll pass this around. You can feel how strong it is, how light it is. So you stack those like Legos, put rebar and fill it with concrete, and the concrete post and beam construction becomes the structure. So, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So we have a little 2-minute video that we show. We go to home shows all over. We went to the National Home Show in Vegas. We go to local home shows and so forth. And so we have a little video we like to show at the home shows that kind of gives you an idea of some of the problems and kind of give you a close end look to our process and our product. So I'm going to play that real quick.
With more storms looming, residents here in Bridge Creek, Oklahoma are trying to clean up after a massive tornado and heavy rains ripped apart this garage, destroyed 1,500 homes.
The official hurricane season is nearly a month away, but the first named storm of the year is already developing. The system named Anna.
This is an explosion and the gas well is burning behind these houses.
All right, this one means business.
Violent weather brought tornadoes and dangerous flooding to Texas. Here in nearby Oklahoma, people are cleaning up from Wednesday's tornado.
We lost everything, got nothing.
But just when residents here need a break, they now have to prepare for more extreme weather expected this weekend.
So just a couple things to point out why there'll be a couple projects kind of flipping through in the background why I just say a few things and I'll pass some time over to Dan. But as you noticed in there, a couple things I didn't mention, in addition to the efficiency, the blocks that we can produce because of the polyurethane that they're made out of. Polyurethane in a different form is actually what they put in the lining of firemen jackets. And so polyurethane is innately fire resistant. Did you see that? Did you see that clip where they were, it was just a 2-inch wall and he held his hand on there. We put a blue flame torch, that's what that was, on a block for 30 minutes. And someone just held their hands there. Okay, that's the hottest non-chemical burn. And it just charred a little bit. As soon as we took the direct flame off, it stopped and so forth, and it was just right there. So they're highly fire resistant. And then they're also soundproof. And the soundproofing is something that's actually been something really interesting. So all the Larry H. Miller Megaplex theaters now are going to be built out of this product. And so we've been in discussions with them. They're building a St. George Megaplex. They're adding on to one in Cedar City. They're building one in Logan, and they're building one in Idaho Falls or Twin Falls. I don't remember which one. But our block is being spec'd into those theaters so that you can sit in one theater. So not just because of the energy efficiency and the fireproofing and so forth, but the other thing that they love is that you can be sitting and listening to, you can be, the next Notebook movie, right? Be on a date with your special someone, right? You're not hearing Jurassic Park in the theater next to you thumping, okay, because of the soundproof features of the block. And so there's a lot of uses for it. And they're pretty easy. They're pretty easy to install. You saw how fast that person stacked a wall. It really is like playing Legos. We joke around and say that we thought about calling the company Megos for man Legos instead of ThermaGreen because they're just so easy to use and they're a lot of fun. So, and then another thing as well, because of the structure of the post and beam construction. Post and beam construction is nothing new. It's one of the 4 ancient construction methods. And so the concrete post and beam construction inside of the blocks that these blocks are engineered to create, it's very seismically sound. In fact, we can just by adding more rebar and so forth, it can be built in any area. And you saw that one house. Did you see that thing in the clip where the one house was sitting there, and then everything else was decimated by the tornado? That was a house that was built out of concrete post and beam insulating concrete forms like these. Okay. And so the market has been around for insulating concrete forms like this for quite a while. And they've been made out of styrofoam where they compress the styrofoam beads, right? And they have it, and there's been some inherent problems with those for a long time. And it's a $1 billion construction industry right now. Okay, obviously the construction industry in the US is a $1 trillion construction industry, and so we're just a small fish in the construction industry as far as our niche market is concerned with insulating concrete forms. However, we have a product that's cheaper and better than any of the products in our little niche market. And so our goal is to get as much market share of our little niche market as we possibly can over the next few years. And we're trying to put ourselves in a position to do that. Okay, and so 10, 15, 20, 30, 40% of a $1 billion niche market industry is still great revenues for a company and growth. Okay, so anyway, I'm going to pass it over to Dan so you can kind of hear his story of how he came to dream up this product and so forth and how it came to be. So here you go, sir.
I've already got one.
But that's for the other one. So this is for this.
Okay. Well, as they'd mentioned, I had started racing horses many, many years ago. And while I was doing that, I ran across this product that I saw that they developed it originally in Canada.
Just put it right here on you. There.
They developed it originally in Canada, and what they did is they developed a little 8 by 8 by 16 inch polyurethane block. And when they made these blocks, they had a break apart mold. So when they got through, they'd wait. It takes about 8 minutes once you put the foam in for it to cure. They'd break this mold apart and take one block out at a time. Well, so then they got real ambitious and they put together 8 molds so they could do 8 blocks at a time. But with the eight molds, they were only able to produce a handful of blocks per hour. So for those little 8 by 8 by 16 inch block, they would have to charge just about $80 a block to even be able to break even on what their costs were. And so when I first was introduced to it, I I knew that there had to be a better way that we could produce this block to where we could produce it rapidly and inexpensively. I knew of all the other polystyrene, like Scott had said, all the other polystyrene systems that are out there. How many of you know what I mean when I say polystyrene system? Nobody? Have you seen styrofoam? Right there. And so that's a polystyrene system. What it is, it's just like your styrofoam cups. And what they do is they take styrofoam beads and they dump it into a mold, and then they've got steam that they infuse, and it fuses those beads together, and that's how they make the block. And as you see right here, they're notorious for having somebody's coined the phrase, the wavy wall syndrome. And you can see why. And so that's also where I after looking at those blocks, I knew that we had to figure out a way to keep our walls straight so that we could compete in the construction industry as well. And polyurethane, as each of you fill that block as it goes around, it's very, very rigid. And it keeps our walls straight. We don't have, typically with the polystyrene block, they have a lot of blowouts and they're just hard to install. There was one construction crew that I talked to at one of the home shows, and he was talking about, oh yeah, we were putting the block up and it was just we were flying along. We had the whole house stacked up in 5 days. And he said, then the guys came in that sold us the block and said, now before you pour the concrete, you've got to have braces here, 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 and here. He said, we spent the next 2 weeks bracing up that foundation before we could pour it. And after they did that, they said, we would never build another ICF home again. And ICF is just an acronym for insulated concrete form. And so,
and even then they had blowouts like this, where it blew out the concrete, blew out a section of the wall, and you have concrete just going out as you're trying to pump it in and fill the walls. So,
and they have to do it very slowly. They'll typically only go in 2-foot lifts. So they'll pour 2 feet, and then they'll wait. And then they'll have a truck come an hour later, they'll go 2 more feet, and then they'll wait. And have a truck come an hour later and pour 2 more feet, and then they'll wait. And so it's a very, very cost prohibitive method of construction. They cannot compete with traditional construction price-wise in any way, shape, or form. And so again, that's why when I saw that polyurethane block, but they weren't able to demold it, and that's where the biggest problem was. And so that's where I started focusing my efforts, and I spent several years of just research and development, just trying to find, first of all, a way to get the block out of the mold. And so I did the same thing. The first mold that I ever made, we made it out of wood, just a break-apart mold like I was telling you about, just so we could at least get our feet wet. And we filled it full of foam, and all of a sudden we put those ratcheting straps on there going each direction, and all of a sudden we started hearing this cracking sound, and you could hear the wood start to crack and break, because when polyurethane expands, it puts a lot of pressure.
Yeah, and so maybe if I interject there, just so you understand, what you do to make polyurethane is you take 2 different components, right? The polyol and an iso that makes it foam, and they're in liquid form, and you mix them together, and you saw us in the video kind of filling up some of those molds, those big metal containers, well, they're aluminum, and we only put in a little bit, and they mix together, we close them, and then they foam up, right? This isn't really much different than what you'd put in your walls, right? When you need to caulk up your windows, if you replace your windows at your house and that type of stuff, you put in that foam so that you don't have a lot of energy loss, right, and so forth. That's what this is as well, but we found a way to compress it at a very high rate and using a more rigid foam to get this block that can hold concrete to fill it up and be in a stay-in-place form. And so that high pressure, Dan, that's what he was talking about when he first started doing it. The wood, just wasn't enough to hold that pressure and ended up exploding.
And we had it all over my garage. My brother and I, we were covered in polyurethane. And have any of you ever touched that great stuff that you buy at Home Depot or Lowe's? Have you seen it? It comes in a can. You get that on your hands or clothes, it just doesn't come off. It's impossible. And so polyurethane is very, very sticky. So I also so we made a mold that was rigid enough to be able to make the block in. So we made it.
Well, it's a glue. Polyurethane's a glue. It's an adhesive, is what it's counted as. And so our problem was, And that's what the industry was dealing with. That's why they used styrofoam. They didn't use polyurethane because nobody could get it to get out of those molds. They had to do pull apart molds and then make it so that it's $80, $80, $90 a pop for one of these blocks, when it really should be more in the $15 to $20 to be competitive in the industry. Okay, so way overpriced. They can't get economies of scale. So talk about how long it took you to develop what Dan developed, and this is our trade secret in our manufacturing process. And we're patent pending on the block and also the process. But our trade secret is what we call our mold release. It's basically a Dan hates it when I call it this, but it's like Pam spray, right? You spray when you're cooking eggs or whatever, and pancakes. You spray it on there so that it doesn't stick to the pan. Well, we have that same problem because we're using an adhesive and trying to eject without having to pull apart the mold. Does that make sense? And so Dan, over trial and error, developed a non-stick spray for polyurethane. PhDs and chemists in the oil and petroleum industry told Dan it could not be done. Okay, and tell them about how your trial and error on that.
We, just on what Scott's saying, a gentleman from Hinkle came in, and Hinkle, they're one of the largest chemical companies in the world. And they came in and as they saw how our block were popping out, because we use air to eject the block out of the molds, and we spray the mold release in, and we're able to make over 200 block an hour with just 32 molds. And they virtually, when you pop them out, they pop right in your hands and you just around stack them. But when he came in, yes, if you want to, you can have him fly in the air and just kind of play around and catch them as they come out of the molds. But when he came in, he said, when he saw what we were doing, he said, what have you done that? He said, that's the hole in our entire industry. He said, we cannot create a mold release that will release polyurethane without, see, silicone is almost an enemy to polyurethane. When you're making block and it's foaming, the silicone will create major holes in it, cause it to shrink down, not to form properly. And so they've spent virtually millions and millions of dollars trying to figure out how to do this. And when he came in and saw it, he was just dumbstruck. He said, I can't believe it. He said, you've got the solution to the biggest hole we have in our company.
Yeah, and so that's something that's cool about entrepreneurship as well, is that we're geeking out about these blocks and the opportunity there. And then Hinkle, who is one of the biggest chemical product makers I mean, you use them. I mean, LA Looks, that gel, they make adhesives. Gorilla Glue, that's them. I mean, they make, and so on and so forth. They're huge, multi-billion-dollar revenue company. And they come in and they tell us, wow, we can't even fill this hole. And so there actually might be an opportunity to have a sub area of our business of just marketing our mold release in other industries. Because polyurethane's made out of everything. The chairs you're sitting in, that green, the foam inside, that's polyurethane, a different form. Your dashboard in your car, all that's polyurethane. Polyurethane's everywhere, and so there might be opportunity for mold release as well. So we're really excited about that opportunity too.
Even in his last home show, Scott saying that we had a group right next to us, and they were selling pillows, and they had the bamboo covering on them, and every time somebody would come by and they're selling their pillows, and I said, we have the exact same thing in this, because they say, well, is it toxic? Does it put off any harmful fumes or emissions when it's in your house? I said, well, that's made out of the exact same stuff as that pillow is right there. And they sell a lot of those pillows in those home shows. And so, yeah, like Scott said, polyurethane is all around us. And so that's why it's a perfect fit for where there is a major hole in the industry as far as, Scott was just talking about real quick. Let me just get to it to show you. This is just showing you the 12-inch block has got an R84 insulation. How do you know what R values are? And how many of you know what U values are? An R value is the restrictive value that a product has. So like a fiberglass bad insulation, it's got an R19. And that's its resistance to temperature change.
So the lower number, the more inefficient your building is. So if you're doing typical construction like 2x6, 2x4, those type of things, you're in the R13, maybe R19 range, And these energy efficient homes that you see a lot of times where they're doing extra batting and the wraps in the basement, I mean, they're lucky if they get in the R24 range, okay, R24. The higher the number, the more energy efficient it is. And so on our block, the big block here is R84, then we have a smaller block that's only 8 inches wide instead.
But this is just a single cell, so when our wall staggers, but we've got these at 40-inch long blocks as well.
Yeah, you got to stagger the seams, right? Any Lego master knows that, right?
That's right. So anyways, Scott got me off there. How do you get this thing to move?
I can do it fast by going here. It's just
okay, just go to the.
Where do you want it to go to?
Okay, just right here. This is the devastation that happened in 1984, and we built a sound wall right along this Ventura Freeway, and when that earthquake came, and it's out of the view of these pictures. I would love to go back and get a picture. There is a picture of the wall in here, right here. That wall and part of that church were built out of our block, and after it was devastated all around. But right there where that church was in the wall, there wasn't even a crack in the wall. And the reason why that is concrete has very, very high compressive strength. You could park 20 tanks on top of your house, and the concrete wouldn't hardly know it's there. But concrete has very little shear strength. Do you know what shear strength is? Yeah, just the rack and shear, you've heard that before. And it's side load pressure when you have an earthquake, a tornado, or hurricane. That's all the shear strength that they're depending on. If you take a shovel and dig under concrete, if you want to break it out, dig under it, and you can either stomp on it with your foot or hit it with a hammer. It'll break right off because it has very poor shear strength. And that's why foundation is a typical concrete foundation. And just to back up one real quick, is a concrete foundation is lucky to have an R1. So its insulation value is very, very poor. And so where we get our strength from is the combination of concrete and steel. And so we have less concrete in our wall because of our post and beam system, but we have more rebar. And so we have it laced with more rebar through there. So even if we built our house as inexpensively and as least amount of rebar as we could, we're still going to meet a seismic zone 4 or zone D. That's like LA, San Francisco. Mexico City is a seismic zone 7 or G. They use the numbers now, the letters now. That's why I tell you, because a lot of people still know it by the numbers rather than the letters. But we could very easily just put additional rebar in our block, and we can easily reach a seismic zone 7. And so the strength of the block is just phenomenal.
Maybe for just a second, so you hear the story, because you're probably seeing that thinking, wow, that Ventura earthquake happened in 1994, right? And we as a company have only been around for a little over close to 3 years now, okay? And what happened was, and this is something that you have to realize as an entrepreneur, you got to kind of realize you have to be able to fill out the market. And what happened was in the early 90s, Dan dreamed up this idea of being able to improve the ICF industry. It was a new industry at the time. They were primarily styrofoam, and some people had played around with polyurethane like we talked about, but they couldn't find a way to do it and get economies of scale in their production and their manufacturing. And so Dan worked and developed the non-stick spray that I mentioned. And that gives us economies of scale in our manufacturing process so that we can manufacture these block and still be competitive price-wise in the marketplace. But in the 90s, what happened was that the way that polyurethane was being made, those two components that were mixed together, one of those components had CFCs, which is the same thing that used to be in refrigerators and all that type of stuff, that in the mid-90s during the Clinton administration.
Well, they still have it in them.
Well, they still have it in them, but they became highly regulated, okay, because of some of the emissions issues and so forth. And so what happened, even though they had 8 plants across the country, they're making a much smaller block. It was really just the size of a cinder block. And so some of this was built out of that size of block They didn't have as good of R values and so forth, and the prices weren't quite as good comparably as what we are now. And so fast forward to 2013. There were some advancements in the polyurethane industry. Dan had followed that and had done some other things with aerated concrete and those type of things in the interim. But the early version of the block really had to close its doors in the late 90s, well, about 95, 96, really, so the mid 90s, because the taxes on the mixtures to make the polyurethane that had the CFCs were so high that they were just priced out of, even with the efficient way to make them, they were just priced out of the market. Okay, and
Freon went from $6 a pound to $94 a pound. If you've ever had your air conditioner recharged, either in your car or in your house, that's what it is. It's $94 a pound. And so that's what we used as the blowing agent to cause our block to expand.
Yeah. So for 18 years, Dan worked on other projects while he didn't shelf this, he kept on developing it, helping with developments in the polyurethane industry. And then we came back in 2013, 2012, 2013, full charge with the bigger block, higher R values, and because of some advancements in the polyurethane chemical industry, we were able to capitalize on some price changes. And so actually, one of our components is a water-based component now rather than with the CFCs. So, and how much time do we need for question and answer?
Oh, there's 15 minutes left.
15 minutes left total? Okay. So, what else do you have, Dan? And then we can just answer questions and so forth and talk about struggles and stuff.
Yeah, just really quickly, just a recap on a couple of things that Scott was saying. Just going back to as it's been mentioned several times, we're building a better mousetrap. And we're spending so much money and resources and everything to try to build like solar panels, the wind turbines we see, to produce cleaner, less expensive energy, renewable energy. And where we believe is that if we just take and conserve the energy that we are using, it's so much cheaper to insulate our houses better than to put a solar panel on. You know, solar panels typically, and at today's price market, if you bought a solar panel, by the time you have it paid off, it'll be worn out. You'll have to buy a new one. And so even though they're a great concept, at least in economies of scale, they'll never make it in the industry. But when it's combined with a product like this, then that makes a big difference because they're not being used near as much. And so they'll last twice the amount of time that they typically would. And so with this product, we've come out with it. We're cost competitive with traditional construction now. So we're not out in left field trying to sell a better product at a higher price. We can sell a much better product at a very competitive price. And so that's where we're at today.
Yeah. Are there any questions? If there's not, we can talk about some other stuff. But
what's that?
What's the R value that it gives you in the wall?
R84 on the 12-inch block.
Yeah, and when we say 12-inch block,
R56.
this is the 12-inch block. There's a 12 inches between the outer walls, and then this is the 8-inch block. There's 8 inches between the outer walls. And so in a typical home, you'd put this in your foundation. So this would be your foundation, and then this would be the above grade outer wall. So, and this one is an R84, and this one's the R.
You're proposing to use it for the above ground walls as well.
Yeah.
For the exterior envelope of the house.
Yeah. You don't have to. The only thing is that if your idea is that you want to build energy efficient, you're going to lose a lot of. It's going to be much more inefficient above ground than it will be below ground. So.
So do you frame on the inside, or do you attach directly to this?
So you can attach directly to this. Inside this webbing, we have wood strips or metal strips that you can attach right to with a 2x4 furred out, and then the interior is just the same. You do 2x4, 2x6.
They're in there every 12 inches on the large block, every 8 inches on the small. If you look at this one right here, you can see the wood strip on the very edge right there. Well, they go every cell on each block.
Yeah. And it's really just exterior walls. Sometimes you can do an interior wall. For example, there's a house in South Jordan that was delayed until the frost goes away, right? So they're going to start up again in a couple of weeks, in end of February, early March. But in the basement, he has a basketball court, and so the whole inside the basketball court is going to be with this. And then the nice thing about that is that you're not going to hear the bouncing ball inside the house. And then he also has a movie theater downstairs that he has as well. So he can a music room movie theater, because he wants to go down and practice his music or whatever and watch movies. And it's gonna be a sound envelope as well, in addition to the energy efficiency. So, but typically the interior walls will be framed normally. Yes, sir.
You run your rebar parallel, and then when it ties in vertically, you just have like put the whole piece all the way down.
No. We tie our horizontal rebar as we go up, and our horizontal rebar goes every 2 feet on center, just like it does on a traditional foundation. But we put the vertical rebars in every cell. And but we fall under the block code as far as the rebar requirements, where we can drop our steel and we don't have to tie it to all the way up. We only tie it to that very top piece.
Like a wet stab into the concrete.
No, we drop it in before we fill the concrete. So then we're just grouting right on top of it.
The horizontal you always put in before you pour the concrete, but in the vertical you can wet drop if you want to. You just need to make sure it gets center. So yeah, so you can see it coming out. Yeah. Okay, go. Keep on going.
On the top exterior walls, you still have to frame the inside, because you have to get your plumbing or your electrical.
Yeah. I would recommend you fur it out with just a 2x2. That's what I did. That's what most all the houses we've ever done have done pretty much. We've built over 400 houses across the Wasatch Front with this, and typically that's what everybody does, because you're only putting one 2x2 every 2 feet on center, so it's very inexpensive to run 2x2s just around the perimeter inside of that house.
And to hang heavy things, you just go through the drywall, and there's a gap, and you go right into the foam.
You can do it two ways. One is you could drop it into the wood or metal in the webbing, or you can use a concrete screw and go right through the foam into the concrete pillar as well.
But yeah, the wood that's in here, it won't break out. You could hang just about anything you want on it.
Yeah, it has a higher pull strength than my weight. Yes, sir.
So are you guys trying to get into like Lowe's and Home Depot, or do you guys want to be the only contractors that are allowed to use it?
We want to be the manufacturer. And so part of what we have to do is train contractors how to use it. We'd love to have more contractors use it. In fact, we're passing jobs that come to us to bid. We're always passing them. We're always looking for general contractors to install them and so forth. We've had discussions with Home Depot about getting them on the shelves and so forth, or at least have them sell it through there. And that's something that's on the horizon right now. So we just barely came out of R&D probably over the past 6 to 8 months. We've done a number of homes that was part of the R&D process and so forth, but we're finally really, this year, 2015 was kind of our year where we're like, okay, we're really ready to take this product to market. We've worked out all the kinks and those type of things in the manufacturing process and also the install recommendations. So Home Depot and potentially Lowe's is on the horizon. So, yeah.
Wouldn't you need to educate the cities as well, the inspector, they've never seen?
Yeah, and that's actually been a challenge that we fight all the time, is that trying to get through, one thing as an entrepreneur that you always have to try and identify, right? As part of, whether you're doing a conventional business plan or whether you're doing kind of the new age without a business plan, we're just kind of rolling. Not necessarily I'm not saying without a business plan, right? But kind of the new thing is that you don't spend as much time doing a formal business plan and so forth. I see that in a lot of entrepreneurs that I work with as an attorney. But one of the things we're finding is that unanticipated things like trying to get into the cities and pass the building inspectors and so forth, there is a lot of education that we're having to do there and so forth. And in fact, some of these pictures, that picture right there, this is actually just up the hill here in Orem. That was a job that's going on. The house is being built right now, just right over by Costco. And so one of the things that we had to do is we had to go into Orem City, and with great people like Mark that were able to help us, we're able to kind of talk and educate and get the clearance and get everybody on board. But we're finding that sometimes that's becoming an issue. And so we're getting additional third-party testing right now that's called the ICC and the IRC, which is just an international building code council and so forth, and they do a whole bunch of testing standards and whatnot that we're wrapping those up right now that hopefully gives the cities and so forth that additional warm fuzzy, really, that, because every project's stamped with an structural engineer. And so, they know it's gonna be fine, but we're gonna have that additional testing to have that additional information. So, anyway. Other question, how much more time do we have?
A little over 5.
A little over 5? Okay, great.
How have you guys been trying to advertise? Have you just been trying to set up meetings with contractors?
Yep, so right now we've been heavily talking to contractors and home builders and so forth, going to home shows, going direct to the consumer. We've been doing architect meetings and so forth and whatnot, and talking to structural engineers. We also, we kind of have the normal where you have the website, do some SEO and those type of things. We're trying to get some SEO and some traction with digital marketing in the ICF industry that's already been established, so that anytime someone's searching for a styrofoam equivalent, they see our block too and look at the alternative. And once we get to that point, the sell is pretty easy. So that's generally what we're doing. Right now we're doing more direct marketing though, where we found that's been the most effective. So.
Just because of the learning curve, because they're installing something different. It's different for their trades. So we like to make sure that we have subcontractors available that know how to install it, so the contractor doesn't have to go out and install it himself. He can call somebody that knows how to install it right in. We don't want to compete with the contractor. We want to support the contractor. And so that's why we have a list of subs and anybody will take anybody as a sub. They just have to make sure that they train with another group so they know how to do it.
Yeah. So, yes, sir. Oh, hold on. We'll go right here and then to Mark.
Is this primarily in Utah you guys are doing this and marketing stuff?
Well, we're based out of Utah, but we've done jobs in North Dakota. We've done jobs in Virginia,
Washington,
Oklahoma, Washington.
Oregon.
I mean, we're shipping. The only manufacturing plant right now is in Pleasant Grove, so it's here. So we're shipping, and one of the things is with shipping costs is proximity to the job is an issue, and so. Part of what we did is we tried to build a manufacturing plant that was cost effective and lean. We actually can put a whole plant on a shipping container and we could ship it. And so we've actually been in discussions lately with a local major religion, the LDS Church. So and they're really looking at starting using these in their meeting houses. And so and building like in overseas and so forth with a plant right there is something that's intriguing to them as well. So, Mark, you had one, then we'll go back there.
Cost comparisons, how do you justify the costs?
Yeah. So cost comparison, and it depends on, a lot of times depends on the finishes and so forth, but cost comparison, we are in the foundation, we are very, very similar. We are within 5% on bids we've been doing. Sometimes we've been lower, sometimes we've been a little bit higher, but that just kind of depends on the installer and so forth. But we're really, really similar in the foundation. In the above grade, when you're comparing it to 2x4, we're more expensive. When you're comparing it to 2x6, and you're trying to get more efficient doing some of the extra stuff, rather than just the bare minimum when you're doing some of the extra stuff to capture some of that higher efficiency, at that point we become right about the same price. But if you're just comparing it to 2x4 above grade or 2x6 without trying to make it energy efficient, we're going to be a little more expensive. But the payoff, that's the thing, is that you'll get $500 from Questar Gas and $500 from Rocky Mountain Power for building over an R35. Okay, just right off the bat, $500 rebate right there. And so that brings us a lot closer. You have to take into account that you already put in the insulation, so you're not going to have to spend $1,000 plus on your insulation. So when you start comparing those type of things, we're very competitive.
And if you get Energy Star certified, you get $1,500 back from Questar Gas.
And you can get Energy Star. So with those rebates, and there's also other tax incentives and so forth, that by the time you calculate all of that, we're the same price or potentially even cheaper, and the payoff's not very long.
What if crude oil goes back to $110 a barrel? Does your cost go up?
That has the potential to, except for that plastics. I mean, really, this foam is really just a plastic, and plastic is a derivative of the oil refining process anyway. And so, it's just a different animal in how the plastic is priced.
It's still a commodity.
It is, and so I imagine that at some point we'd see some changes in price, but
we're buying our polyurethane today for the same price we bought it back in 1992.
Yeah.
So.
And in addition to that, the oil we were competitive when 3 years ago when oil was quite a bit more expensive, and if this continues on, it takes quite a bit longer for us to get the price cuts, and so we haven't seen the drop in the plastic price yet. Hopefully that, because it's more delayed than the crude. Yeah. So we'll see.
Did you had a question?
I was just going to ask price comparison as well. So.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, entrepreneurship's a lot of fun, guys. So it's a lot of fun. It's intriguing. It's fun to watch ideas come to pass. And it's fun to work with great people and great ideas and the challenges. And I think the other thing as well is that it's fun just to see helping other people get other opportunities. Watching an opportunity for families to have jobs, people to be able to provide for themselves and be involved in something exciting. So anyway, I don't know, are there any more questions? So thanks.